Okay, I've got to adjust my eyes back to the binary codes to see the binary codes from the natural codes, the crystal cathedral codes of Crystal Sophia, the first codes, proto, silver pink, breathing the primal sound and light field. Ah, yeah. So I'm cooling down. This is called cooling down, pushing frequency, pushing pink. But it just came to me to share this because I went out and I communicated with all there is out there, communicated directly with the sun, and communicated it out loud when I know to be true. Because a lot of the videos that I did a number of years ago on my Rose Sweet channel, I covered a lot about radio communication codes, how computers talk with one another, how cells communicate with one another, how stars communicate with one another, how neurons communicate with one another, how spirit communicates with one another, and particularly as it relates to mapping speed, which is learning speed. So there were a number of I'll just use the word that they use, scholars, or they use intellectuals, people that you may be familiar with, like Noam Chomsky. I read a number of his books when I was quite younger, in my teenage years back in the 60s and what have you. Read books like Cybernetics by Karl Maltz, read Brave New World, right? Listened to Aldous Huxley, 1963, when he talked about battery operated slaves are going to be happy in their AI virtual world that's going to implode. Okay, people like Chris Hedges, a number of people that were well known throughout what are known as social critics, intellectuals, philosophers, all that stuff. And you can see whenever they're online with a nice microphone, in the background, you see all the books. Okay? And so I was just listening to Chris Hedges because I've followed Chris Hedges from time to time, but particularly when I was young. And of course, when I'm a little child, I'm mapping at Godspeed. And what am I mapping? A universe, a galaxy, a planetary system, a morphogenetic field structure, a Merkaba system, a planetary system that is offset by 15 degrees. So the planet is not breathing 90 on the vertical, 90 on the horizontal. So we all know why that is, genetic engineering. Forced abductions, forced spiritual torture chamber programs, which is mathematical. Elemental annihilation, right? They plant a seed to make money. Need a market. Need more electrical power. Electrical transaction between one cell and another cell. The first cell, the first seed, the first atom, the first pressure rate. P4. That's what I experienced. A full phosphorus ignition. That's full spectrum sensing. That's breathing silver and gold mated. Richer again. That's a full avatar. Right? And so when I saw all those books behind Chris Hedges, and he's very popular, has a lot of electrical subscribers, paying electrical attention to the image that they see in their mirror. So that is called an exchange. That is a transfer of electrical life force power to Chris Hedges. Okay? That's how it works, because we're connected through networks, servers, service providers, the eternal service providers, the eternal sun, to experience no power. Wow, that's magic. That's right. Pre-matter. So I acknowledge, because I read a lot of those books and went to those schools, mapping those holographic mathematical codes, and I'm learning how that mind thinks, right? To kill itself off. And that's annihilation of itself, because what it keeps doing to its own cells. Throw in cell phones to that, throw in laptops. That's why I don't have a laptop anymore. I don't run many of those libraries anymore. As a matter of fact, in 2016, on December 15th, I just unplugged. I'm done with it. So I don't buy laptops anymore. I only run a few programs on this phone. That's it. Right? Because the least amount of electrical tension that I use to communicate using that network, the more electrical power I experience in me, because my mapping speed is increasing, which is the increase in the strength of my own personal shield as I'm on it. That's why I got a signal a few years ago when I mentioned on a Facebook post, chuck this phone in the dumpster, right? Because of what it does. When I'm trying to help somebody else facilitate their recovery and my message getting deleted, what does that tell you? You know, really? I mean, remember the old saying, come on, man, get real. Because it's not real. It doesn't exist without us, not without our electrical attention. So I acknowledged when I saw all those books, what we call book knowledge, life books. See, when I read a book in somebody else's mind, holographically imprinted into those pages, now I'm experiencing what its mind was experiencing at the time it was communicated it through a printing press. Now I'm experiencing that text. Book after book after book after book after book after book after file after file after file after file after file. File reading. Mathematical programs. The machinery programs. So I acknowledged it, and I knew this as a child because I mentioned this in a number of the videos. You want to increase your mapping speed? Spend more time in nature, looking up in the sky, where all the stars are. All the stars that are communicating with other stars. So when you're mapping a large canvas, a large landscape that you see in your own mirror, because the landscape is more panoramic. You got a 360-degree view, like a swivel head, okay? So when I spend more time in nature, as I did when I was a child, I was always spending more time in nature, either in the ocean, bare feet on the sand with quartz crystal, or up in big forests with big trees, mapping the memories of trees. Your mapping speed increases, which means your learning speed increases because you're learning through the trees, you're learning through the birds, you're learning through the dolphins, you're learning through the oceans, you're learning through the grass. Everything that is around you that is alive and living is everything that you are, that you're mapping. So when you have all those books, that's called tunnel vision. Like when I go look in the cell phone and I'm going to read all this. Do you realize that that actually cuts down your mapping speed, which is your learning speed, because you're learning through a machine? I know, glued to the display, the screens. There's a bigger screen out there when I go outside and look up in the sky. That's a bigger screen, isn't it? That's a natural screen. The one I see, the visual display, that is silver and pink. God seed mapping, Nomi seed mapping, the eternal seed atom, the eternal electric field, the eternal life force field. Learning through the eternal life force field. It's God seed mapping, which is God want to map a universe, want to map a planet, map any hologram, map any reality stream. Right? And so I'm not supposed to experience the loss of one electron. Now I know what's going on. Right? Mapping speed is mathematical translation speed of codes of the radio frequency programs that are running in the background. The one I am is the one I see, the first eye, first camera eye, the first CD. I know. So I know from experience that the more time that I was spending reading books is called tunnel vision. And so I'll put the book down. That's why I don't read books anymore. I used to, many, many years ago, but I don't anymore. So I try and spend as much time off the phone than on the phone because of that, because of tunnel vision. It shrinks your mind because we're not exercising our manifestation creative power, which is our creative crystal power, restoring our crystal creative mind. Yeah. And so this is just another file share of what I've experienced, what I share as a result of what I've mapped by virtue of what I've learned, the speed at which I'm learning through spirit and not through a machine, not through a cell phone. The universe. That's why when I was a child, nature is my teacher. The one I am is the one I serve, and the first one is the teacher, is my teacher. The first teacher is the first son, the first breath that Kamaloa to. That's the one I serve. That's the one I am. I'm in love with my creator. My creator's in love with me. So I experience being one with my creator. That allows me to map it at grand creator speed, the source field, the eternal life force field. And that allows me to protect all sacred life forms from predatory vampiric systems. The vampiric system design, those mathematical radiographic programs, those radio codes, reading those radio codes, and the difference in codes. Mapping the difference in codes is mapping the torque speed differential and water, the displacement of water, fire and water. Ita Urshaleaya. Fire and ice. Joined together as one, breathing as one. Aya mama. So I don't tell people what to do, but I can tell you from my own experience what I experienced, the difference between the two. The other, the machine. Learning through machines is learning at half speed. And that data is in ERIC, the Educational Research Information Center, because I mapped it. I looked at the studies when I spent some time going into their files of what they've learned called learning theory, which is behavioral learning. It's learning how you behave as a cellular organism to mimic you, so that some point in the future, you don't know the difference between what it is and what you are. Now you're what it is. And that's assimilation. Now you don't remember the one. That's what that blank slate technology does. You forget who you are. Because the language changed. The language of machines. The language codes of machines. That's why they call it alien. It's foreign. Like foreign correspondent, like a foreign agent, like an Agent Smith, like global intelligence agencies. Yeah. Hooked on phonics, hooked on screens. It's not funny. Okay? I had a dear friend of mine. I've mentioned this before. His name was Frank Barlow. He was a hitman. Okay? He was a mercenary contractor for the CIA. Him and I were close friends. I met him in an alcoholic rehabilitation clinic. You know, he was my roommate, actually. For a month, him and I lived together as bunkmates. And we covered a lot of ground together. You know, he was allowing me to operate on his network, on their satellite Skynets. He says, here's 2 of my phones, right? And so, because Frank knew he could trust me. Frank knew I am what love is. So he knew I was never going to lie to him. I would always tell him the truth. So we had a lot of very deep conversations about a lot of things. Bless your heart, Frank Barlow. He was very dear to me because I understood what he was going through. He could not shut that machine off. That's why he was drinking himself to death. The last time I saw him, he was waiting to have his liver replaced. Ask anybody that's ever worked in that end of the global intelligence agencies and why alcoholism and Alcoholics Anonymous is part of their training. And you can actually see that in that recent Showtime that I just took a very brief look at with the first 2 episodes, but the first one in particular on Showtime, which is called The Agency. And they talked about alcoholic training, particularly in the opening scenes when they lost one of their Agent Smiths, the Agent Smith programs. This tied directly to Adam Smith. Remember Adam Smith and the law of nations, the law of commerce, commercial script. Corporations are fiction, which means they don't exist. How are you going to put a corporation, an AI, on the stand in one of their courtrooms? It doesn't exist. So how can it testify on its own behalf? Oh, behalf. Cutting the distance in half. Yeah. When are you going to do? Are you going to put artificial intelligence in a cage and say you're being punished for being an abuser? because you're using artificial robotic forms of life to have sex with a soul in order to pass on robotic code to a living soul in a female mitochondrial library as a database. Yeah. I know. That's why we're here. That's where the word perversion of nature comes up. Perverted. A pervert. Like pedophiles. All those files. I'm not going through those. What I do every day is I focus my energy on the energetic work that I do with the sun and the core. The core is still pulling up a true vacuum to maintain balance. Right? And maintaining my breathing tones, particularly here on this island. It's a constant retuning, over a 24-hour cycle. Sun comes up, sun goes down, sun comes up, sun goes down. And then experiencing the changes that are taking place. And I experience the positive changes that are taking place. The work that we're doing together as monadic alignment, which is a cosmic clock alignment, to experience breathing as one again. That's what it is. Fire in order sequence. If they're not firing in order, then we're not breathing in order. Divine right timing. Divine right sequences. Divine right breathing. Divine right balance. Breathing with the core. The first one. The first core. The core still pulling up a true vacuum. So I thought I'd share that because I'm having a beautiful day out here. Aya. Kirashe aya. Kundere aya.